Hot, as my grandson would say. Hot. Okay, everybody, let's jump straight in this morning so I can get this done so I can take my dog to the vet and get his stitches out. So, yesterday we did a video and we talked all about how much it costs to build a guitar. The $240 guitar became $700 from a Chinese factory, a quote unquote Chinese factory, or some sort of jobber factory over in Asia. And I think some people didn't. Most people maybe got it. I think there's a few people that were like, "This doesn't make any sense." Okay, makes sense. So here's what I want to do today. I want to build the same guitar in the United States. Okay. And one of the things we're not going to do here is we're not going to make a better guitar in the United States. I think we should try to build the same guitar in the United States. And I know that these are all hypothetical numbers and I don't cover every little thing, but I want to just give you the general idea of why stuff costs what it costs. Okay. Yesterday we landed at $699 for a $699 price point. We landed at $240 manufacturing cost and about $330 per guitar by the time it was landed cost. Okay. QC'd and landed. So what if we make it in the United States? Let's go ahead and make the exact same guitar. Same scale length, same specs, same. If you want to watch that video yesterday, it doesn't really matter what the specs are. We're just going to make it the same. Same finish expectations, same fret quality, same everything, just to keep it as fair as possible. This isn't, let's put a 3A maple drop top on this guitar since we're making it in the United States to make it, you know what I mean? It's none of that. We're just going to make the same guitar. So the first problem is that made in the United States is not a factory. Okay. Over in China, they have centralized manufacturing. This has, and I don't want to get into politics here, but basically the way their government has structured their industry, because they can do that with the type of government that they have structured their industry into blocks. And so when you can basically have anything made. You can go over there and say, I want to make a car, and there is a car making city, and there is a computer making city, and there is a guitar making city, and there is, right? That's loosely, and I know that you jokers will get in the comments and tear all that apart, but it's really the truth. It's really on the simplistic view of that. That's kind of what it is. So there is like a guitar making city over there. So you can just like call one place and get everything done. In the United States, the ecosystem is totally different. You'd have to figure out who's going to, where you're going to get your wood. There would be all this admin on the front end, right? Not only the design of the guitar, but the admin on the front end to say, and it's like anytime I build a new pickup, I've got to be like, okay, where am I going to get this part? Where am I going to get that part? I got up early today. Where am I going to get that part? Who's going to make the bodies? Who's going to make the necks? Who is going to finish them? Paint them? Who's going to assemble them? Who's going to do all of that stuff? Who's going to do the final QC? Probably I'm going to have to take a lot of the final QC and stuff on in-house. So there's going to be some admin costs there and some personnel there. Am I going to find one OEM to do everything, or like a turnkey situation? Or am I going to have to become like a general contractor and project manage this entire thing? That's a deal. If you want to do this, I've got a couple of turnkey operations that I can recommend to you. They will not be cheap, but they will be good. And you can't just call up your buddy with a CNC machine and say, hey, can you do this? It doesn't work like that. You got to find somebody that's kind of specialized in the area that you're doing. And so this takes some shopping, and not everybody wants to give up their OEMs. So it's hard to find this kind of stuff. Like this is it's a big process. So, basically, because at this point you're not trying to start a guitar factory, but you have to become a project manager at this point. It's not the same. You could call up a place in China and answer a few emails, and yes, there's a lot of work in that, but not near as much as trying to project manage an entire guitar. I've worked with companies, of course, on the development side of guitars, and I will tell you that there's always at least one guy, his full-time job is just to manage that. I mean, it's a lot. Okay, so we quote the same guitar. Our China factory guitar was $240. So let's say on our fictional United States quote, materials and wood, so just the wood, $100, $85 for hardware, $90 for pickups. That's not my pickups. That's probably like some generic pickups, probably still from Korea, or maybe some Seymour Duncans, maybe, if you can push it right. That's kind of low for that though. The CNC operations, $200. The finish operations, $140. That's pretty low, actually. Assembling and wire setup, $100. Packaging, $25. Manufacturing overhead margin, because that has to do with all this other little weird stuff we didn't talk about. We talked about it yesterday, but I'm not going to go into every little detail. You probably end up being about $900 to build the same guitar. Now, these are illustrative numbers. Okay, I'm not telling you that there's a business out there that can do it for $900, and I'm not telling you that that is a hard number for those of you dorks in the back row who keep yelling about stuff that doesn't make sense. This is just a hypothetical, but it's realistic. And the reason I know it's realistic is because I have a lot of friends that do this, like for a real job. Okay, they're not just internet trolls. I could call a guy right now and be like, "Yo, how much did you pay for that body blanket?" And he would tell me. Okay, so these are real numbers. This is what I do for a living. Okay, so in fact, I sell a guitar that is made by another company. It's not mine. It's Texas Toast Guitars, but I have to know this stuff so I know how my profit fits into it. So why is it $900? Well, the lazy answer is, well, American labor is so expensive. Okay, so that's big, sure. But it's not everything. And that's kind of not even the biggest thing. Scale, that's a big thing. We're not building as many of these things at a time. Automation, supply chain, component costs, because component costs are going to be higher here. They're just going to be higher. The reason you can buy a Chinese guitar and get a bridge, or you can go on eBay and get a bridge for $5 or whatever, is because somebody somewhere, there's a distribution center somewhere who's buying 70,000 of these things. So they're buying them in China, and they're kind of crap. Okay. So if you want to use like good hardware from a smaller company, because it's inevitably going to be a smaller company like Hipshot or somebody, they're building them at smaller numbers. The stuff is better. It's more expensive, like that kind of stuff. So even if you were to buy the same exact stuff on our Chinese guitar versus our American guitar, you're still going to pay more for it because you're not buying the same exact volume. The Chinese company they've also controlled their own manufacturing of the actual hardware. They've also then controlled the distribution cost to the factory, and they've also controlled the factory. So that's all controlled costs, where we don't have that here. So it's a whole thing. Environmental and regulatory compliance, I don't think I have to tell you how much that is a difference in the United States versus in China. Benefits and payroll burdens are different here than they are over there. Equipment utilization, meaning the cycle time of each piece of equipment, purchasing power, and then specialization of industry, because like I said, over there, they've put these things in blocks and they can manufacture stuff. We don't have that. So I got to have a CNC guy. I got to have a CAD guy. For example, if I'm going to build a guitar, I got a guy in Florida who will do my CAD work, but I got a guy in Colorado who will cut my bodies out. I've got a guy see what I'm saying? And I've got a wood guy in Oregon where I would get the wood from. Like, all of this stuff takes time, and it takes money to put all this stuff together. So, a giant overseas factory is going to do the same action thousands and thousands and thousands of times. And even a very good American factory is only going to be doing it hundreds of times. So efficiency isn't necessarily about just working faster. The thing about the scale is people don't understand. I want to do a complete separate video on this, but one of the things people don't understand is just because you have more doesn't make it cheaper. There's always a bottom for that cost. People think that if you buy 1,000, it's $10. If you buy 10,000, it's $1. And if you buy, 100,000, it's 10 cents. And if you buy, when do we get down to a penny? Like it's not reasonable. Everything sort of bottoms out. And I think, well, it's the economy of scale. Well, yeah, but a bridge still has to cost what it costs, right? So the system is just completely different. Now, where manufacturing in America wins is we don't have all the import stuff. If you can get most of everything, this has changed lately, but if you can get most everything made in the United States, then a lot of that import stuff goes down. You have to pay for it, but a lot of that import stuff goes down. So all of the broker fees and ocean freight and all that stuff, we're talking like $12,000 for 250 guitars or something. It was a lot, right? So a lot of that stuff goes down. So now you're figuring $25 per guitar for domestic freight. Development allocation, we had these numbers all figured out yesterday, but if we redivide them to this guitar, like $20 a guitar, QC rework allowance, $15 or $20 a guitar. I think that's what we were at, somewhere between 10 and then add 8 and whatever. And then our factory costs, now we're looking at like $965 to build a guitar in the United States. In our scenario here, we had a $333 imported guitar and we have a $965 effective cost here for the same guitar. Now, we've not chosen different materials. We've not chosen anything. It might be the same mahogany not the same mahogany. It might be, the materials would have inevitably be different, actually. So there is that. Because you can't, I'm not saying you can't, I suppose you could, but one of the things that they do in China is they don't tell you the truth when it comes to what wood is. I'll just leave it there and we can have another conversation about that some other day. But so what should it retail for? Well, our 3 times model, which is what we were doing yesterday, would put it at $2,400. That makes a lot of sense if you are retailing the guitar. So if you're retailing the guitar, then $2,400 would be the number. Okay. If you are not retailing it, if you are actually selling it direct, $1,799 would be pretty tight. $1,999 would probably be pretty realistic. So let's say we're going to retail the guitar, or we're going to sell the guitar direct, no retailer, which is not really realistic. So $2,000. It's going to be $2,000. That's what it has to be. And you're going to say, well, wait a minute, you're making $1,000 on every guitar. But we have the same problem as last time. That is gross margin. And this is the other thing people need to understand. Margin is different than profit. Okay. So for those of you in the back who yell about this all the time, who don't own businesses, I'm going to give you a fundamental statement. And I know that some dork will argue this, but for those of you that actually know business, if you have a 40 to 50% gross margin on a product, by the time you get done, your company will have a 5 to 8, if it's really good, 10% net profit at the end of the year. If you have less than 5% of net profit at the end of the year, your company will not be solvent in 3 to 5 years. So you gotta have a 40 to 50% gross profit on your, or gross margin on your guitar to end up with a 5 to 8 pushing 10%, if you can help it, net profit at the end of the year. So that's the reality. And I'm not going to get into all the business ins and outs of that because people argue. And somebody who knows the actual, like if you're a business major in college or something and you want to get in the comments and break all that down. But that's sort of the general rule that we've been taught for a very long time, and it seems to work. I mean, and not just in guitars. I mean, everything. I used to manage a collision shop, and we would go by that same number. It would be like you would need 45% gross profit, and you would be at 5 to 10% at the end of the year, and we would actually be surviving as a business at that, right? And you're paying everybody, and you're feeding your family and everything. Like it's a good business if it's working. So, and people are going to see that $1,000 of profit in a guitar, but that's margin. That's not profit. That's a different word, and it means a different thing. Okay. Now, we should have said that yesterday because it applies the same with the guitar yesterday as it does today. It's just the number's bigger. But the net profit is the same, which is also very interesting. Now, the cool part about all this is that making a guitar in America is actually easier in a sense because you can buy less. So you could probably say, instead of 250 guitars one of the things about Chinese factories is that their minimum order quantities are always really high. And it makes sense. And that's the only way it makes sense as an importer because of all the importing costs. Even when we buy magnets for pickups, I bought some this week, and I think I bought 2,000, 4,000, 6,000. I think I bought 8,000 magnets, right? And that'll last me, I don't know, 3 to 5 months or something like that. But if you were to order 1,000, it would be 3 times as much. And the shipping would still, because the shipping cost me $250 no matter what. So you have to buy super high amounts of volume when you buy from China or Asia or somewhere. Now, the cool part about buying in America is you don't have to do that a lot of times. My guy in Colorado, who will turnkey a guitar from start to finish, will let me make 50, right? So it'll be a little more expensive. So let's call it $1,000 or $1,050 instead of $950 or whatever we said, $965, whatever we said. So let's call it another $100. So $1,050 times 50 is $52,500, which is less than our original outlay when we bought it from China. That's pretty cool. The guitar costs 4 times as much to manufacture, but our initial production commitment is actually lower because we can build lower volumes. The cool part about that is our inventory risk changes our entire approach to the business because now, instead of a $60,000 PO and having all of that money bound up in a huge number of guitars that we hope we can sell, then we don't have that, right? So we only have 50 guitars. We have minimal logistics because everything is super easy. And if everybody hates them, we only have 50 problems instead of 250 problems, right? So yeah, that's a fundamentally different issue. And if they love them, then all you have to do is send an email and say, okay, make me 50 more, and you're off and running. This makes just domestic manufacturing a lot more agile too, because remember when we made a little change and it took 90 days to get another sample and blah, 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 like all that stuff. And it was $450 a change and all this kind of crap that we talked about yesterday. It doesn't much matter here. It'll still cost a little bit, but it'll be way easier and way faster because we're switching up stuff, 50 guitars. My guy allows me to do it every guitar because we only build one at a time. So, and I don't make as much profit on it, but it's okay. Actually, I don't make that much money at all when I do this stuff with Texas Toast. I just like doing it, to be honest with you. So yeah, so you can say, oh, well, let's make a P90 version. Well, there's going to be some cost development in that, but you can do it faster because you're not risking 80 grand every time you make a change because you have this whole MOQ situation. Because sometimes it depends on the factory. The total number of guitars, right, could be the MOQ. So 250 guitars, and it will give you 4 variations within that, right, like colors. Sometimes it's 250 guitars is the MOQ in China for every SKU. That's total. Then now you're really into some super big money. Now the American guitar has a big problem though. There's a big problem, and I know you've already been thinking about this, and so let's talk about it. So at $699, an import guitar is pretty easy. People say, "Wow, it's a nice guitar, $699." Now at $2,000, people are going to say, well, it has to have this, 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 and this, and this, and why doesn't it come with a hard shell case, and blah, blah, blah. So the customer expectations are going to obviously change because the guitar is more expensive. It makes sense. It's just part of how our brains work. So the irony is that we said we're going to build the exact same guitar, but the market might not let me sell the same guitar, which means that I'm going to have to make the guitar even more expensive because it's going to cost me more to differentiate that guitar so that the market will accept it. So what can happen is that my intention could be to build the same guitar as an import instrument and sell it for $2,000, but now I have to add a bunch of crap to make it cooler so that it's not the same guitar as an import guitar. And now the guitar is $2,500. So that's an issue. That's an issue that we run into manufacturing. So what you have to do is you have to set expectations differently, and you have to understand your market. And this is where it gets into a whole marketing thing that we're not talking about today. But that's a problem. That's a thing that you have to do. You have to think about. Okay. And you say, okay, well, what if I just build them myself? That's what I do. We brought all of most of our manufacturing in-house. We cut all our own parts. We do most of our own everything here. Well, then you got to buy a CNC machine. You got to have a building. You got to have a blah, blah, blah. Now you're looking at $1 million worth of, everything. By the time you get that done, it's $1 million in capital. And then after you get all that paid off, now you're off and running. But you didn't solve a manufacturing problem. You started a manufacturing company, which is a completely different bag of tricks and bag of problems. So which business is better? Well, that's interesting. Which business is better? The import guitar is going to have a higher MOQ. You're going to have to manage more inventory, more risk, more supply chain issues, or a longer supply chain issues. All the import logistics. There's a lot more cost variable actually in importing because all those costs that I gave you yesterday are variable. So this month, a container of guitars might be $12,000 to get it here. Next month it could be 15. It's crazy. I have friends who do this. I've got a buddy that works at Reverend, and he was telling me like the variable of what a container of guitars costs. It's bonkers. Like I don't want to say numbers because that's not my business to share, but it's all over the place. So those things are super variable. You can regulate it a lot more in the United States. And you have smaller production runs, you have faster iteration, you have less inventory, simpler logistics, but a dramatically higher cost per unit. So, should we make a guitar in the United States or make it overseas isn't really a manufacturing question as much as it is a business model decision. You have to go all the way back to what kind of business do I want to run? This gets into marketing. Okay. I want to say R.I.P. Dolly Parton actually is the one that said something, and I can't remember what the exact quote was, but basically, sell the thing before you make it. And that is really, really, really that principle of, I don't remember what the quote was, but the principle of what she said was that is sell the thing before you make it. And so you have to decide what your business model is. I'm not saying that you should or shouldn't do one or the other, but what I am saying is that as a consumer who complains about how much stuff costs, it's very, very important that you understand that these are actual differences, right? And the fact that, and we never once said that an American guitar is better than an import guitar. We're trying to make them kind of the same. It's not just a specification on the back of the headstock where something is made, and it doesn't actually affect the quality. It is the country of origin is a decision that ripples through the entire company and affects everything. So it's not my guitar is better than your guitar. It's not, it's a business decision, and nothing more. So I hope that people are still going to think what they think, I guess.